What is going on, Chess YouTube? In today's video, we are looking at one of Magnus Carlsen's greatest games of all time against the defending chess world champion, Ding Liren. This one is Magnus versus Ding from the 2020 Carlsen Tour Finals. And here we go. In the game, Ding Liren is playing as white. He opens one knight f3, and here, Magnus Carlsen, he goes for a very interesting first move. That is one c5. And now the interesting part about this is Ding Liren has the option of going e4, transposing back to a 1 e4 opening, and that is what he does in the game, despite not being a 1 e4 player. Here, e4 is the move, and we do have a Sicilian defense on the board. Now, the big question, which variation will Magnus Carlsen go for in this game? Well, his favorite line does start with knight c6, heading for a Sveshnikov Sicilian. However, instead, in the game, he does go d6, and we'll have to see what he has in mind. Now, here, Ding Liren, he does go for the open Sicilian. d4 is the move. Then c takes, knight f6, pressuring e4. Then knight c3 does defend. And here, Magnus, shockingly, he does go for the Najdorf Sicilian in this game with the move a6. Now, Magnus has said on numerous occasions the Najdorf is a very risky opening as black, not because it's bad, but just because white has so many different options against it. For example, white can go bishop g5, bishop e3, bishop e2, bishop d3, bishop c4, h3, g3, h4, a3, a4, queen d3, knight b3, and on and on and on. Virtually everything against the Najdorf is playable as white. Now here in the game, Ding Liren did play the main line, starting with the move bishop e3. This is known as the English attack, and white's idea is simple. He wants to go f3, queen d2, and long castles, then launch an attack against the black king on the king's side if it castles there with the move g4, g5, h4, h5, and so on. Now here, Carlsen, he has three main ways to respond to Ding Liren's move bishop e3. Those are e6, e5, and knight to g4, putting pressure on the bishop. Now in this game, he does go e6. That is a slightly unusual move. Most black players do go for e5 or knight to g4, but e6 is also very playable. Now from here, Ding Liren, f3, that is the main line, and here black has many different options. For example, h5, d5, b5, bishop e7, and so on are all playable. In the game, Magnus does go for the main line as black, that is the move b5, gaining space on the queen side and potentially threatening a b4 break in the near future. Now here, Ding, he has two main options, g4 and queen d2. However, instead, he plays a slightly offbeat move in this position. That is the move a3, with the idea of trying to slow down that b4 advance. Now, b4 is still possible, but after b4, then a takes b4, white does win a pawn, and he has a great position. Now here, Magnus, in this position, he does go bishop b7. Again, that is the main line, perhaps intending knight d7, rook c8, and so on. Now here, Ding Liren, g4. Gaining space on the king's side, a very strong move, and again threatening g5, potentially on the next move. Now here, if Magnus does go knight d7, that would be a massive mistake, as then g5 hits the knight, then I would have no good square to go to, and may be forced to go to, say, h5 or g8, but neither of those squares are very good in this variation. Instead, Magnus does go h6 first, stopping the immediate g5 advance, and yes, g5 is technically playable, but that would destroy most of white's attacking potential. You really have to go for moves like h4 and rook g1 before going g5. That way you do maintain a pawn on the g5 square after h takes, then h takes. Now, very importantly, with this move h6 on the board, Magnus can go knight d7 without worrying about g5 and then having to retreat the knight. Now here, Ding Liren, in this position, queen d2 is the move. That is the main line, again setting up long castles on the queen side. Now here, Magnus, we have knight bd7, the main line for black, and sure enough, Ding does go long castles here. Long castles is the move. Again, this is the main starting position of the English attack with the move e6 for both sides. Now, instead of long castles, white could have gone for a more aggressive approach with the immediate rook g1 or h4, but overall, long castles is thought to be the strongest move there. Now here, in this position, the main line for black does involve an immediate d5 break, breaking in the center. The main line goes e takes d5, then knight takes, bishop takes, and from there, white has many playable moves. But instead, Magnus, he decides to maintain the tension in the center, and he does just go rook to c8, developing his rook on the queen side before touching his king side pieces, including the bishop and the rook on h8. Now here, Ding, he has many different options as white in this position. Overall, rook c8 is a little bit dubious, and that means white is fighting for a significant advantage here. Now, the main moves include king to b1, h4, rook g1, and bishop e2. In the game, Ding does go king b1. Most of these moves are of roughly equal value. Which just means all of them are relatively equally good. Now here, Magnus, in this position, he does break in the center with the move d5. That is the strongest move. It would have been a little bit better to do that on the prior move, but doing it here is also very good. Now, very importantly, white cannot go e5 in this position. That would lose that pawn on the e5 square immediately to knight takes e5. Therefore, you do have to think about trading on d5 immediately, and that is what Ding does in the game. So, e takes d5, and now Magnus, he has a choice. Do you want to recapture with the knight or the bishop? Of course, recapturing with the e-pawn is not a good idea. That would open up the e-file, weaken the pawn on d5, and so on. That would be an absolute disaster out of the opening. So instead here, Magnus, he does recapture with the knight. Knight takes d5. That is the stronger recapture. Instead, if you take with the bishop, bishop takes d5, then white will be able to gain the bishop pair whenever he wants with the move knight takes d5. So overall, knight takes d5 for Carlsen is the right response. Now, here, Ding Liren, he takes on d5, knight takes d5, then bishop takes, and now Magnus does have quite a bit of pressure on this diagonal here. So with that in mind, Ding Liren, he just goes rook to g1, a very flexible move. Now, the benefit of rook g1 over, say, h4 is severalfold. First of all, you are getting the rook off this diagonal here. Beyond that, you also maintain the option of going for an immediate f4 advance, intending f5 or g5 instead of moving the h-pawn. So overall, rook g1, a far better and more flexible move than h4 in the prior position. Now here, Magnus, how does he want to follow up the attack? It's very important to find the right move right here. Well, it turns out the computer loves the idea of going queen c7, and if Ding does go f4, then you shoot your knight over to the queen side, knight to b6, intending knight to b4, hitting both the queen on d2 and the bishop on the e3 square. Now, instead of all that, here Magnus, he does go bishop c5, finally getting his dark squared bishop into the game on the c5 square, and now he does have the option of castling kingside whenever he wants to. However, overall, bishop c5 was not the best move, and the biggest problem with this move is it does clog up the c-file. The rook no longer has that unrestricted access to c2, and the whole plan of knight b6 to c4 is a little bit weaker now. Alright, here, Ding Liren, in this position, he does gain space on the king side with the move f4, again, highlighting the benefit of rook g1 on the prior move. Now the rook is perfectly placed on g1, and these pawns, either of them could go march down the board on the next move. Now, here, Magnus, what are his options here? He can go, say, knight f6, intending knight to e4, jumping in with the knight, and capitalizing on the newly weakened e4 square. Of course, that pawn on f3 is now on f4, therefore it doesn't guard e4, so knight f6, intending knight e4 would be very strong. Beyond that, black can also go queen c7 or short castles, but in the game, Magnus does go knight to f6, and this turns out to be maybe the strongest move. Now, Ding Liren, he's not phased. He just goes bishop d3, getting his last piece into the game. The bishop is perfectly placed on d3. It eyes the king side, and if Magnus does castle on the king side later in the game, that bishop could be a very powerful attacking piece. All right, here, Magnus. The best move is just jumping in with the knight, knight to e4, continuing that rerouting process with the knight. However, instead in the game, he does go queen to c7. Now, the benefit of this move, the queen does line up with the x-ray attack on that c2 pawn. In the future, that could be a very serious threat. However, in the short run, it's not that big of a deal. That pawn on c2 is guarded by 1, 2, 3 pieces for white. Therefore, queen takes c2 is not realistically going to be a threat in the near future. So with that in mind, simply knight to e4, jumping in with the knight and putting pressure on that queen on d2 would have been the better idea. Now here, Ding Liren. He's got to find the right way to follow up the attack, and he finds a very interesting move that I quite like. He retreats the queen back to the e1 square. Queen to e1 is the move, lining up the queen with the king on the e8 square. Now, very importantly, if Ding Liren does go f5 on the next move with the king still stuck on e8, things could get very dangerous for Magnus very fast. For example, f5, and if black takes on f5, then bishop e3 would hit the queen with the check on the king. Again, there are all kinds of tactics with the queen and the king on e8. Therefore, here, Magnus, he will have to respect that threat and find some way to get his king to safety or to clog up the e-file. Now, in this position, he does simply go knight to e4, jumping in with the knight. That is the right idea. Now you are putting more pieces on the e-file in between the queen and the king, and that does increase your king safety. And above all, you still did not have to castle kingside. That is very important, as the king side may not be very safe after all, especially if white gets the g5 advance in the future, threatening g takes h6. Alright, Ding Liren here. This is a very critical point in the game, and he has to find the right follow-up right here. What are the options? Well, you can do something about the knight. For example, knight b3 is a very strong move, and in fact, it does turn out to be the strongest computer move. However, that line is insanely complicated. Black will have the option of taking on a3, the bishop sacrifice, and those lines are just crazy. Beyond that, Ding can also go king to a1, try and get his king off the b file, getting it a little bit safer, and beyond that, moves like bishop takes e4 and rook to f1 are also playable. However, in the game, he doesn't play any of those moves. Instead, he continues his march down the board on the king side with the move h4. The alpha 0 h-pawn has entered the game, finally. However, the problem with this move, it's a little bit slow. Yes, white is threatening g5, but even if he gets that in, black can just go h5, keeping the king side closed for now. And meanwhile, Carlsen, his attack is just raging on. Alright, here Carlsen, he does go queen to b7, sliding his queen over off the c-file. It turns out queen b6 may have been a little bit stronger, putting more pressure on that knight on d4, but b7, a decent move as well. However, after this mistake, Ding Liren does have the chance to fight for an advantage. Now here, the best move for Ding, again, is knight to b3, jumping back with the knight, and very importantly, if Carlsen had gone queen to b6 instead of b7, this move knight to b3 would not have been possible, as Magnus would have too much pressure on that bishop on e3. However, after the inaccurate queen b7, knight b3 is an option, but Ding doesn't find it in time pressure. Instead, he plays the move c3, and this turns out to be a very dubious move, both for strategic reasons. It does weaken those light squares around the queen side near the white king. However, beyond that, black here has an immediate tactical shot to blow open the king side. And if you like puzzles, go ahead and pause the video right now and try to find the key idea for Magnus in this position. And while you're at it, go and smash that YouTube like button for more videos just like this. Alright, here, Magnus, of course, he does sacrifice the bishop on a3. Bishop takes a3 is the move, an absolutely brilliant idea. And now, of course, if white takes on a3, b takes a3, then the move is knight takes c3, hitting both the king and the rook on the d1 square. The entire king side will be blown open. Magnus will win back an exchange and a pawn for the sacrifice piece. And overall, he will be doing outstanding. So with that in mind, b takes a3 is almost an unthinkable move. You just can't do that here. I mean, that bishop is going to be stuck there forever. It simply cannot move right now. All right, Ding, once again, b takes a3 is not a good idea at all. Then black has the resource b takes c3, opening up the b file with the attack, and the attack would be just outrageous. So with that in mind here, Ding, he tries to get the queen side closed. He goes for the move c4, putting pressure on that bishop on d5. However, Magnus Carlsen, in this position, he spots an absolutely brilliant move, and it is even better and more spectacular than bishop takes a3 played, 2 moves ago. And again, if you like puzzles, pause the video and try to find the key idea for Carlsen right here. And yes, of course, the key move here for Carlsen is the knight sacrifice, knight to c3 check, hitting the king. And yes, this is a clean knight sacrifice. Don't even try to argue against me on this one chess YouTube. I know you will in the comment section, but don't even try it. All right, here, Ding Liren. Of course, you cannot take that knight. Then b takes c3, opening up the b file would be deadly. Then queen to b2 check would be the obvious follow-up. So, b takes c3, not a move. Instead, king to a1 is played by Ding. But here, Carlsen, again, he is not slowing down. He just goes bishop takes c4, winning that free pawn that was made free by the move c4 earlier by Ding Liren. All right, now, Ding, he's got to go for something here. He's got to find some way to distract Carlsen and get his own attack going. If he sits back and defends, he will be blown off the board in short order. So what are his options? Well, technically you can take on c4, but again, that is playing right into Carlsen's hands. That is what he wants. So instead here, Ding, he counterattacks in the center with the move f takes e6. A very good practical choice. However, Carlsen, again, he's not slowing down. Here, he just castles on the king side, ignoring the threat of e takes f7, as again, that is just not that big of a deal. The more important factor is the fact that the queen side is being blown open and Carlsen's attack on this side of the board. All right, now, Ding, how does he defend? Well, finally, he does trade on c4. Bishop takes c4, trading off the light square bishops, but now after rook takes c4, that rook comes flying into the game, and black will have the option of, say, rook f to c8 later in the game if he wants it. All right, now Ding, he tries to defend on b2, rook to d2, defending the b2 square with the rook, a decent idea, but here Magnus, he plays yet another bishop sacrifice. Bishop takes b2, giving up the bishop once and for all. Now, of course, you simply have to take it. You can't allow the bishop to go back to the a3 square where it's defended. That would be game over on the spot. So with that in mind, king takes b2 is the move. But now here in this position, Magnus has many different, very attractive ways to proceed. For example, the engine loves the idea of knight to a4, hitting the king, the idea being king to b1, then queen to e4, flying in with the queen, and then the queen, the rook, and the knight all work together to attack the white king. That would be deadly. Now, of course, there are other options in the game. Magnus did go b3. That is also a perfectly fine move, as that knight is defended by the rook. However, this move is a little bit less accurate, and it does give Ding some fighting chances. Now here, the computer loves the idea of bishop takes h6, the bishop sacrifice, and it is a very good practical choice to try and open up some lines against the white king, but instead we have the move e takes f7, and then queen takes for Carlsen. All right, now, in this position, Ding Liren, he does take that pawn on b3, knight takes b3 is the move, but here, Magnus Carlsen, he plays one final brutal move. That is the move rook to b4, and now the knight on b3 is pinned to the king, and get a load of this. There is simply no way to defend the knight. The only piece that could do it is the queen, but d1 is covered by the knight. Queen d1 would lose the queen on the spot. Therefore, there is literally no defense to the idea of queen takes b3. And for that reason here, Ding Liren, he resigns on the spot to Magnus Carlsen and is simply unstoppable queenside attack. Wow, what a game. All right, Chess YouTube, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash that like button. And if you want to see more videos about the Najdorf and the English attack, check out this video right here, where I show you 5 of Magnus Carlsen's greatest games of all time in this literal exact variation, the English attack of the Najdorf Sicilian. Again, if you enjoyed this game, check that video out. It will blow you away, and I'll see you in the next video.